The one thing we humans hate to admit when speaking about big questions is we don't know. We've had millennia of basically making it up to fill in the enormous gaps we have in our knowledge of the universe around us, and indeed of our own minds. But in the last few mere decades, discoveries have been made about both the nature of the universe and of the human brain that have pretty much told previously deeply held convictions to flutter off. For one thing, it seems the universe is only partially composed of matter, and all that matter is flying away from each other at an accelerating pace. For another thing, the human brain, via information from the sense organs and nervous system, generates everything we think, remember, feel and react to. As bowdlerised as those statements are, the intimate mathematical and biological details are in most cases beyond the understanding of most of us, which means it's only a select few that even understand these things. The rest of us just have to accept what information we're given, whether we understand it or even like it or not. The thing about that information is, whether it's understood by everyone or a mere skilled and trained few, it still stands as demonstrable fact. Belief in that information, understanding it, interpreting it in any way, is all a matter of subjective opinion. The data says what it says. What it ultimately means is irrelevant because, as we know, human meaning has no intrinsic place in the rest of reality outside our human engagements. So we're stuck with assigning meaning to meaningless data, and that's where a lot of the trouble starts. So really, when it comes to big questions, our previously deeply held convictions are in no strife at all, because as far as belief and meaning are concerned, millennia of deeply held convictions will hold more meaning for people than abstract information about background radiation or neurons. We lay idiots don't understand a word of that stuff, even if we bothered looking it up and doing a bit of reading. It's certainly not information we can use in our stupid daily lives, so why even bother with it? Well, the problem is that we all prefer certainty, and while we've had to make things up so far to have that certainty, shoving imaginary gods into very real gaps of our knowledge and understanding of things, we have verifiable information now that those gods aren't real and the gaps continue to be very empty, which makes us all very uncomfortable. Now, the smart people just leave it all out and stick only with what they know, which works only for a while. Everyone, for example, has to deal with death in some way or another, other people's at first and then their own, which of course lends people to at least contemplate the reality of life and death. On the other hand, you've got the deeply held convictions, which reassure people by saying that no one actually dies, that there's some element of you that retains your memories and personality and so on that survives the physical body perishing and goes on to have adventures in some other fairyland type place depending on whether you've behaved according to certain ethical codes or not. It all defies even the most basic common sense, even without any of the discoveries of the past few decades, but it makes people feel better. On the other hand, you've got raw information that says, no, none of that shit is real, there are no hells or heavens in the universe, your consciousness is not independent of the pure mechanical workings of your brain, and when you die, you die. Much more demonstrable, but not reassuring. And even though we've got the actual data to make those claims verifiable, such claims have been made for as long as the convictions have been deeply held, so no one deeply holding convictions is going to be in any mood to suddenly change their minds and go, yes, of course, how could we have been so stupid all this time? Let us throw off the shackles of our ignorance and embrace the new understanding of reality and we'll just die when we die. That's not going to happen and no one should expect it to. So even people who, for the most part, leave out any interest in big picture ideas and just stick to their own little lives are going to, at some stage, come to some big picture conclusion when it comes to death. And those conclusions will more likely be the more reassuring than the more accurate. In the meantime, there are those who enjoy a kind of smug inner glow in accepting what science says, which is equally contradictory because science only says so much. The thing about data is that that is all it is, and in itself it says very little about meaning and value in those basic human terms. It's just measurement and calculations and conclusions thereby derived. 1 + 1 = 2 is true, but all it is 1 + 1 = 2. Attaching any other great significance to that is a waste of time. But there are those who attach significance to it by attaching significance to themselves for knowing it. And while I'd much rather be someone who accepts what science says to me, I don't think that alone makes me more knowledgeable about reality than anyone else. Because what is the science actually saying to lay dickheads like me? That on the macro level, all matter was originally in condensed heated mass, how and why we have no idea, then it expanded, how and why we have no idea, and will continue to expand until it runs out, how and what happens afterwards we have no idea. Then, on the micro level, the stuff in our skull somehow generates this stupid thing called consciousness. Knowing things about reality doesn't make me better than anyone else, But there are people who like to think that it does, at least for themselves. People who are very, very keen to know as many things as possible. There are even people who talk about such things as theories of everything, which is pretty much the giveaway of the human hubris involved. That we poor, dumb, pointless little creatures, fluff on a speck in space, can somehow have the godlike intellectual powers to comprehend everything is pretty much the same as saying we already know everything because God told us. We idiot humans just have to have some kind of comprehension about reality. But what I think the great thing about these recent discoveries and the debates generated thereby is that they raise more questions than answers. Just how the hell did all that condensed matter at the start of the universe come about in the first place? What was happening before that? Does our standard measurement of time even count? Do the mathematics involved make it clearer? If not, what does that say about our mathematics? What does it say about us, our abilities to use mathematics only to certain degrees? And what of the so-called hard problem of consciousness? Just how does the brain generate it? What even is it? How do we measure it? What good even is it if we can't use it to comprehend it? While the scientists in their relevant fields can conjecture answers to these questions, many of them, or perhaps not all, will have the basic dignity to say that ultimately, without any conclusive proof, they don't know. And since the scientists are, so far, the trained and practicing experts in their fields, and the rest of us are just numpties, we have to defer to their expertise, which means we are deferring to people who don't know. They don't know how the universe started, why it even started, and they don't know what our own consciousness is or why it is. And if they don't know, neither do we. So most of us will go on with the deeply held convictions, or more increasingly make up new ones. Since we're all experts on everything now because we're all on social media, we all have the right to have opinions on anything we want. So we do. And every guess is as good as every other because they're all just guesses without a lot of backup apart from what is already known scientifically. Unless the guesses are based on made up bullshit, in which case they can be discounted very easily. But in reality, in practice, we don't know. We just don't know. And is there any real indication that we will know? Probably not, although I don't know myself. But the one question that is seldom raised is, do we have to know? Is it necessary that we know? Consider a species that knows everything. What of it? Does it transcend itself in sheer knowledge? Does it get a prize? Does anything change? We still have to eat and shit, we still die. One day we will all go extinct and, if the present science is correct, everything is just going to disappear one day anyway. So why are we so keen to know everything? What will be done with all this knowledge? I think that if anything, science has demonstrated that 1, we don't know most of everything, 2, we never will, and 3, it's actually pointless trying. We are what we are, fluff on a cosmic speck, and it's enough just to get by in the day without having to draw great cosmic conclusions from our pitiful efforts. Human hubris derived from our consciousness and abstract thinking, our ability to imagine, makes us think of ourselves as the centre of the universe or the pinnacle of nature, or even just part of a greater whole that is pretty much just an anthropomorphised version of how we think and feel. In all ways, we think too highly of ourselves. But if science has shown us anything, it's shown us what a wank that all is. But again, it's also shown us how futile it is to throw aside our hubris and get on with getting on. So science has only shown us so much, but we are still stuck with what we are and how we see things. It's ironic. We know now that we're nothing in a universe of nothing, but we also know we can't actually believe that. We have to believe we're something else.